Some metropolises rise to prominence, their names etched in history by the bustling currents of trade, by merchant ships laden with gold and silver. Others brand themselves into the annals of time through unwavering political power, becoming the bedrock upon which dynasties and empires are built. But there exists a city that transcended these conventional definitions, inscribing its name into the chronicles of humankind with something far grander, a synthesis of seemingly opposing forces. It was forged from the immense, burning ambition of pioneers, from the sweat, tears, and even blood of millions of nameless laborers. It sprung from the profound gratitude of children for their parents, and from the relentless, fierce aspiration of countless ordinary souls whom history has never deigned to name. This was Bombay in the late 19th century, a magnificent precursor to the vibrant Mumbai of today. What is truly astounding, perhaps even dizzying, is not merely the magnificent architectural beauty of structures that still stand, challenging the very notion of time, but rather an almost unbelievable truth. In a mere blink of historical time, a scattered cluster of wild, isolated islands adrift in the open sea rose, transformed and blossomed into one of the most extraordinary and dynamic metropolises on the planet. Yet, perhaps, this is precisely the highlight that compels anyone to pause, to hold their breath and listen intently until the very end. Behind the palatial railway stations, with their intricately carved arches and mystical nightlights, behind the soaring clock towers echoing with their steady chimes, behind the bustling docks overflowing with gold, silver, precious jewels, and tons of pristine white cotton, symbolizing boundless prosperity behind all this, lies the authentic fate of millions of individual lives. Some arrived in this city with nothing but the clothes on their backs, carrying in their meager luggage only a fervent dream of changing their lives and the raw courage of those who had nothing left to lose. Others dedicated their entire existence to hauling and shouldering heavy cargo on the docks, quietly contributing their strength, but never once being mentioned in any historical record. There were impoverished mothers who spent their days awaiting the distant chime of the church bell, a sacred signal for prayer, finding a sliver of solace and peace amidst the daily chaos of life. Then there were the destitute patients, silently entering hospitals, clinging to a hope of survival as thin as a thread. And, crucially, there were those who generously poured their entire fortunes, sparing no expense, to construct majestic libraries, compassionate hospitals, and enlightening schools, ensuring that the city did not merely grow rich in material wealth, but also found its soul, acquiring depth and profound compassion. This profound tapestry of human experience is precisely why the story of Bombay isn't merely a nostalgic recollection of a bygone city. It stands as a stern, resonant reminder, echoing powerfully into our present day, about how a true civilization is genuinely created. It speaks of the silent, often invisible cost that humanity pays for fleeting prosperity, and it poses that eternal question which every generation, in every era, must ultimately answer for itself. When money, power, and economic growth arrive too swiftly, too suddenly, do people still remember how to live kindly with one another, how to preserve their dignity, and how to maintain their innate compassion? The deeper one delves into late 19th century Bombay. The more one explores its hidden corners, the more it becomes clear that this is not an antiquated lesson lost to the mists of history. On the contrary, this is a sharp, unyielding mirror, reflecting directly onto our contemporary age, exposing the very challenges and choices that we ourselves are confronting today. Great cities are not simply built with sturdy stone, resilient steel, and generous endowments of money. They are forged from the glistening sweat of nameless individuals, from the piercing shriek of train whistles cutting across the smoky harbour skies, from the anxious yet hope-filled first steps of immigrants, from burning dreams of a better life, and from the countless, untold losses that history often rushes past, neglecting to recount. Mumbai today is a global megacity that commands the world's attention, leaving observers awestruck by its sheer scale and dynamism. But in the late 19th century, when that same city was still known as Bombay, everything commenced with a very real, very human, very fierce heartbeat, a symphony composed of life and unyielding aspiration. And what utterly astonished people was not just the architectural splendor of its grand structures, but the miraculous speed with which a landscape of scattered, wild islands transformed itself into one of the most vibrant, dynamic, and captivating centers on the planet. The journey to uncover the essence of Bombay must begin at Bombay Harbor, for this was no mere docking place. This was where the city breathed, inhaling the rhythms of commerce. It was where money and wealth flowed in like lifeblood, nourishing a vast organism. It was where Bombay's destiny unfurled itself upon the waters, carried by every wave and every billowing sail. By the mid-19th century, it had already ascended to become one of Asia's most vital and bustling ports, an indispensable gateway for global trade. Cotton, silk, and rare spices passed through these quaysides on a scale and volume that few other places in the world could rival. Gigantic ships from distant Britain, from the faraway Arabian lands, from mysterious East Africa, and from ancient China docked here, disgorging their precious cargo of silver, modern industrial machinery, and exquisitely crafted manufactured goods. By the close of the 19th century, Bombay had seamlessly claimed its title as Asia's largest cotton market, exporting more bales of cotton than even Liverpool did during its own zenith. But behind these impressive figures, these dry financial reports, lay the vivid, sometimes heart-wrenching, tableau of porters stooped under the scorching sun, of merchants toiling sleeplessly through the night, meticulously calculating as prices fluctuated by the hour, by the minute, and of families gambling their entire futures on a single fated voyage, a bountiful harvest, or a successful port call. This was prosperity, brilliant and dazzling. But it was also unrelenting pressure, the harsh demands of a city that never allowed itself to stand still or rest on its laurels. It was this colossal, ceaseless flow of money from the cotton industry that fundamentally altered everything, sparking a true revolution within the city's very core. Modern banks were established, railway lines were constructed and expanded, weaving a vast network of transportation. And, most notably, magnificent, colossal Gothic architectural masterpieces rose dramatically, serving as a resounding, unequivocal declaration that Bombay was no longer an ordinary coastal settlement. It was burgeoning into a new powerhouse, a formidable center of power and prosperity for its age. If one were to choose a single, quintessential symbol for this boundless ambition, it would undoubtedly be Victoria Terminus, now known as Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Terminus. Upon its completion in 1887, this was not only the most expensive building ever constructed in India, but also one of the world's most spectacular and architecturally impressive railway stations, a veritable masterpiece of engineering and art. Every single day, over 100,000 people, carrying diverse hopes and burdens, passed through its massive gates. They hailed from every corner of the Indian subcontinent, speaking myriad languages, adhering to different faiths, and nurturing unique dreams of a better life. For many, this was their very first glimpse of Bombay's true grandeur with their own eyes. Imagine the raw awe of a poor farmer, stepping off the train for the first time, standing stunned before this colossal, magnificent edifice, amidst the growling of steam engines, the boisterous calls of the crowds, and the metallic screech of iron wheels on the tracks. They must have instantly grasped that this city was far vaster than they had ever imagined, and perhaps far colder and more indifferent than they had anticipated. Yet, it was precisely there, amidst the chaos and overwhelming scale, that countless opportunities unfurled, beckoning them to embark on a new journey. Moving away from the bustling grandeur and somewhat cold majesty of the railway station, the elegant silhouette of the Rajabai Clock Tower rises majestically, like a sacred reminder that even amidst the dizzying, relentless pace of commerce and industry, there remains a vital space for warm familial affection and profound filial piety. This architectural marvel was inspired by London's famed Big Ben, but what truly enshrined it in the collective memory of Bombay's residents was not its architectural resemblance, but the deeply touching reason behind its creation. The tower was built in loving memory of a wealthy merchant's blind mother, so that she might know the time for evening prayers through the resonant, melodious chimes. Every 15 minutes, its bells would regularly echo across the streets of Bombay, soothing weary souls and gently reminding them of eternal values. In a city hurtling towards the future with the breakneck speed of trade and technology, this particular story served as a poignant testament that the most magnificent structures can sometimes spring from a sentiment that is intensely private, profoundly quiet, deeply human, and utterly compassionate. Generations of Bombay University students walked past this very spot, listening to those chimes, much like listening to the rhythm of time marking their youth, internalizing these timeless human values. And that, ultimately, is what constitutes the true depth of an authentically civilized metropolis. Not merely knowing how to accumulate material wealth, but also how to preserve and cherish the profound meaning of gratitude and human connection. If Victoria Terminus represented the city's ceaselessly beating heart, where millions converged and departed, then the Municipal Corporation building was undeniably its brain, the place where crucial decisions were meticulously formed. Completed in 1893, this imposing structure housed talented engineers, dedicated doctors, and visionary administrators who confronted a colossal challenge: how to govern an explosively growing metropolis, constantly expanding across the foundation of 7 old, previously unplanned islands. From within these walls, the nascent ideas for a modern sewage system, urban lighting, improved roads, and other essential infrastructure were conceived and implemented for an increasingly dense and diverse population. This was the pivotal moment when Bombay began truly learning how to become a modern city, rather than simply a rich one. And I believe this is a lesson that every subsequent generation needs to internalize profoundly. A city is not defined by its towering skyscrapers or its bustling markets. It is defined by the way it cares for the daily lives of its citizens, from the streetlights that illuminate their paths, to the cleanliness of its roads, to the efficiency of its public healthcare system, and crucially, to its ability to ensure that millions of people can live together harmoniously without descending into chaos. Civilization does not reside in superficial glamour. Civilization is found in the capacity to organize human life with decency, dignity, and unwavering fairness. Nearby stands the David Sassoon Library, a truly beautiful architectural masterpiece, erected in 1847 as an invaluable gift to the city from one of Bombay's wealthiest merchants, David Sassoon himself. Stepping through the arched entrance of that library, the cacophonous din of the bustling streets outside seemed to instantly cease, to simply melt away. Spacious, cool, and tranquil reading rooms stretched across 2 floors, brimming with books in English, Hebrew, and Marathi, forming an invaluable treasure trove of knowledge. Lawyers, scholars, journalists, and intellectuals frequented this serene haven to read, to ponder deeply, to seek inspiration, and to find a temporary escape from the relentless whirlwind of money and ambition. This particular detail is remarkably thought-provoking within the context of that era. In a city where nearly every conversation, every transaction, revolved around commerce and profit, this sanctuary existed solely to allow people to pause, to quiet their minds, and to engage in deeper reflection, connecting with the accumulated wisdom of humanity. Today, as our world is inundated by breakneck speed and the incessant noise of information, perhaps what we truly lack is not more information, but rather peaceful spaces for contemplation, for genuine introspection. A generation exceptionally skilled at making money, yet unable to pause to read, to understand, to reflect on life itself, can very easily construct enormous wealthy cities that, tragically, house small, superficial souls. And then, from the most tranquil and solemn of places, Bombay leads us to its most boisterous, most vibrant heart, Crawford Market. This was far more than just a simple marketplace. This was where the city ate, where people debated, haggled, and lived most authentically, revealing every shade of human emotion. While other grand structures belong to the realms of law, education, or transportation, this particular place belonged unequivocally to the people themselves. It was the very pulse of everyday life. Horse-drawn carts laden with fresh produce, vegetables freshly harvested from distant orchards, fragrant spices from across India, and luxurious imported goods from Europe all converged here, creating a kaleidoscope of colors, sounds, and aromas. Within the market, languages mingled, cultures clashed and intertwined, and the rhythm of commerce never ceased. It was the economic heart of Bombay at its most intimate, most genuine level. This place reveals a truth often forgotten. History is not solely written in splendid palaces, majestic parliaments, or grand railway stations. History is also penned at bustling stalls, in the haggled price of every rupee, in the simple yet warm meals of working-class families. Today, the market has been renamed Mahatma Jyotiba Phule Mandai, but its original Victorian structure remains almost entirely intact after more than a century and a half, a testament to its astonishing resilience. Perhaps it is because places truly connected to human life, to essential needs and genuine emotions, inherently possess an indomitable vitality and enduring longevity. The Bombay of that era also knew how to display its sophistication and opulence through Watson's Hotel, an iconic establishment that opened its doors in 1871. The entire building was constructed from prefabricated cast iron components, a cutting-edge technology of its time, manufactured in England and then shipped across vast oceans to India. At its inauguration, it stood as a truly unique, unprecedented edifice in the entire country, a potent symbol of cultural and technological fusion. From the moment it opened, it quickly became the city's most prestigious address, welcoming esteemed Maharajas, formidable generals, and colonial governors. But what truly etched this place into history in a uniquely special way was this. It was precisely here that the country's very first film screening took place. Pause for a second to truly reflect on that. Within a luxurious hotel in the bustling heart of Bombay, people gathered for the first time to witness the magical moving images flickering onto a white screen. A great nation, a vast culture, was stepping into the cinematic age from that very room, ushering in a new era of art and entertainment. Sometimes, history shifts its course, not through thunderous explosions or clamorous revolutions, but through the hushed, astonished silence of hundreds of people, seeing the future vividly unfold before their very eyes for the very first time. At the bustling commercial nexus, where every heartbeat of the city converged, stood Flora Fountain, a magnificent monument sculpted from pristine white Portland stone, modeled after the grand, majestic fountains of ancient Rome. Surrounding it were the city's most powerful institutions, from government buildings to major banks. It was far more than just a beautiful statue to admire. It served as a proud exclamation mark on Bombay's map, a powerful emblem of a city asserting to the world that it was not merely wealthy, but also possessed refined aesthetics, undeniable power, and an unassailable position on the global stage. Nearby was the Central Telegraph Office, one of the most significant structures ever built in Bombay, revolutionary in its implications. Before the advent of the telegraph, news between India and Europe had to travel by ship for weeks, significantly delaying all critical decisions. But when the cable connecting Bombay to London was successfully laid in 1870, everything changed almost overnight. A message that once took a month to reach its destination now arrived in mere minutes. Cotton prices from London reached the harbour in near real time, enabling merchants to react instantaneously. Military orders could traverse a vast empire in seconds. This was the moment Bombay truly entered the age of instant connectivity, a monumental leap forward in technology. And does this sound familiar? Every era experiences a communications revolution that profoundly reshapes power dynamics, wealth distribution, and the speed of decision-making. The only real difference is the technology itself. Human nature, it seems, remains constant. Whoever grasps information faster will shape the game earlier and seize a decisive advantage. But a city cannot merely thrive on vibrant commerce, magnificent architecture, or cutting-edge technology. It must also confront silent pain, the burdens and illnesses that afflict its people. That is why Sir J.J. Hospital holds such immense and profound significance in Bombay's history. Established in 1845, it was one of the most crucial medical facilities ever constructed in Bombay, a true fortress of life and healing. Prior to its founding, there was virtually no organized healthcare system available to the vast majority of the impoverished population. The hospital came into being through the extraordinary generosity of Sir Jamseti Jiji Poi, the city's wealthiest merchant, who dedicated a substantial portion of his personal fortune to its construction after witnessing countless Indians tragically perish without access to proper medical care. Perhaps this is the part that moves me most deeply. In an era where it would have been incredibly easy for people to think solely of profit and personal enrichment, there were still great individuals who saw the suffering of their fellow human beings and utilized their wealth to save lives, leaving behind a magnificent humanitarian legacy. When the devastating bubonic plague ravaged Bombay in 1896, it was this very hospital that became the epicenter of the city's medical response, where doctors and nurses toiled day and night, battling tirelessly to save the sick. It stands as a stern reminder for all future generations. The true progress of a society is not measured by the number of its wealthy, but by how many of its vulnerable and easily hurt are saved and protected when crisis inevitably strikes. Our journey through time to the Bombay of old now draws to a close. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Bombay was more than just a city. It was a teeming, ambitious crucible, a vital nexus of trade and culture that had surged from the Arabian Sea. With a population swelling beyond 1 million souls, it rapidly solidified its place as one of the most extraordinary and powerful metropolises on Earth, a jewel in the British Empire's crown, yet distinctly Indian in its vibrant chaos and indomitable spirit. Today, Mumbai, its modern incarnation, is undeniably larger, louder, and exponentially more sprawling in both scale and population. Yet, every winding street, every towering edifice, every whispered story, every pulse of this modern megalopolis traces its roots back to that fiercely energetic and transformative era. Reflecting on late 19th century Bombay isn't about sentimental longing for a bygone past. It is, more crucially, about understanding that every truly great city, every enduring civilization, is forged by the parallel pull of two intertwined forces, two inseparable sides of the same societal coin: ambition and responsibility. Ambition drove the construction of colossal railway stations that defied engineering norms, bustling seaports that connected continents, opulent hotels that catered to the world's elite, and telegraph lines that brought distant lands closer. But responsibility compelled the establishment of enlightened libraries that democratized knowledge, compassionate hospitals that offered solace and healing, essential infrastructure that sustained life, and public spaces where human dignity and intellect were not just acknowledged, but celebrated. A city fueled solely by ambition, by the relentless pursuit of profit and power, might glitter with opulent wealth, yet its heart would remain cold, its spirit detached from the human experience. Conversely, a city guided only by responsibility, by well-meaning intentions devoid of strategic vision, might radiate warmth and compassion, but would ultimately stagnate, unable to grow, to innovate, to reach its full potential on the world stage. Bombay became legendary because, during a brief but tumultuous period of history, it managed to embody both these elements in powerful, harmonious equilibrium. However, perhaps the greatest value bequeathed by this story doesn't lie in its unique architecture, nor in its booming commerce, nor even solely in the material wealth of a port empire. The profoundest lesson resides in how that city compels us to introspect, to confront ourselves, and pose deeply human questions about the very essence of existence. When we behold a magnificent train station, it's easy to gasp in awe at its majestic arches, its imposing stone sculptures, its intricate engineering prowess. Yet, how many pause to truly see the invisible architects behind such grandeur? How many acknowledge the untold stories of those who poured their sweat, their tears, their very lifeblood into its foundations? The countless forgotten souls whose destinies were irrevocably shaped, often broken, beneath the shadow of such monumental ambition. When we visit an old hospital, it's effortless to laud the generous donors, recount its long history, or marvel at its sheer scale. But how many truly stop to ponder the desperate mother who once cradled her ailing child within its walls, clinging to a thread of hope, or the impoverished patient who, for the very first time, felt their life was as worthy of saving as anyone else's, regardless of their station? When we gaze upon an ancient library, our thoughts often drift to books, scholarship, and knowledge. Yet, perhaps the most invaluable treasure isn't found stacked on dusty shelves, but rather in the underlying belief that a city aspiring to a distant future cannot abandon the spiritual lives of its people, cannot afford to be indifferent to the nurturing of human hearts and minds. This, I believe, is why late 19th century Bombay retains such profound weight and significance to this very day. It doesn't merely recount the miraculous rise of a city, it narrates the steep price of ascent, the sacrifices made, and the moral choices that inevitably accompany development. A city can be exceedingly rich, incredibly modern, yet still leave its inhabitants feeling isolated, adrift in a sea of strangers. A society can be highly civilized, remarkably advanced, yet remain coldly indifferent to its most vulnerable and disadvantaged members. An era can be fast-paced, relentlessly busy, yet utterly forget the most fundamental human virtues: gratitude, kindness, civic responsibility, and the conscious effort to leave something good for future generations. That is why I do not view this merely as a dry historical account. I see it as a very modern, very direct warning, intended for each and every one of us. For ultimately, what endures, what truly defines a generation, is not how much money individuals accumulated during an economic boom, nor how much wealth they amassed. What truly endures is what they built for others, who they shielded from the storms of life, what doors they opened for the next generation to step into a brighter future. A clock tower erected out of sacred love for a blind mother, a hospital built from profound compassion in the face of the unjust deaths of the poor, a library opened so that knowledge might not be solely the preserve of the privileged, but the common heritage of all humanity. These are the things that set Bombay apart from so many other wealthy cities throughout history. It was materially rich, yes, but in its most beautiful, most humane moments, it remembered how to be human, how to live with heart and purpose. And perhaps this is the most worthy question for each of us to carry forward, to ponder deeply after hearing this meaningful story. In our own lives, within our families, in the communities we inhabit, what are we truly building? Are we merely chasing speed, money, and fleeting convenience? Or are we also striving to leave behind something useful, something profound, something imbued with human compassion and eternal value? Because in the end, a generation will not be remembered simply for living in a rapidly developing era or for possessing abundant material wealth. They will be remembered for the kind of people they chose to be amidst that era, for how they lived, and for the legacy they bequeathed to tomorrow. If the story of Bombay makes you reflect, hold on to it as a reminder for yourself and share it with your loved ones, especially the children and grandchildren in your family. Let future generations understand that true civilization does not begin with the tallest skyscrapers that pierce the heavens, nor with the most magnificent scientific and technological achievements. It begins with how human beings treat one another with compassion, kindness, and love, even as they collaboratively build the future. And if we can remember that lesson, if those values are continually passed down, then stories like these will never grow old. They will forever remain a guiding lighthouse, illuminating the path for generations to come.